Okay, Tracie, let's take a look at this apartment complex gym attack again. And let's talk about some of the techniques that you would prescribe that someone like her or someone not like her can use.
Yeah, let's not forget, she's young, she's fit, I mean, strong. Most of us aren't like that. And so we have to remember, we have to know our physical limitations. How long could we fight? Are we in enough shape to do that? Are we strong enough to fight? But most importantly, do we know how? Because if I don't have that strength, or I don't have the endurance, knowing the technique is what's going to get me out of that situation. For example, here we see her using her hands and close fisting, but kind of almost a slapping motion, where a good self-defense technique would have been a nice, good five-finger eye gouge. If you can't see, you can't fight, right? Maybe a palm heel to the nose, or even a good, fingers to the throat. I like the eyes because going back to if you can't see, you can't fight. So once again, it's just knowing the techniques.
Well, and also we prescribe, she does very good, even though it's a compressed clinch, essentially, when you're looking at fighting from a clinch. And so she doesn't have a lot of force on her strikes, and yet she's distracting him. She actually is hurting him, putting him under duress. So he decides to change that and takes her to the ground. So
Right.
that's her. What about people who are not as young, not as athletic? Um, what would you prescribe for them?
You have to you need to know how to defend yourself. I mean, I think self-defense training should be a part of school, because just a little bit, just knowing that going to the eyes, the nose, the throat, could have disabled him, and then she could or whomever could have been able to get to people, is life-saving.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up when you started talking about targets, because that's one of the concepts that we teach, which is to use your strongest weapons against his weakest points. Okay, so what are his weakest points? Well, it's this band that goes around the eyes and the ears, and then the midline that goes all the way down from your face, your throat, your solar plexus, stomach, and down to the groin, and then the triangle that goes between your groin and your knees.
Yeah.
So there's those things we can attack with our fists, our hammer fists, with our, like you said, clawing to the eyes. I love this eye gouge that we'll get into later, but same thing like as you. And then primarily we use hammer fists, elbows, and we like to use our kicks. Our feet and our legs are the most powerful parts of our bodies, and it allows us to push him back and keep distance. So let's talk about some of those kind of things, because there's two things happening. There's that front bear hug, and then he takes her to the ground. Now, you also brought up that you heard that part of one of the things she said that got him to release her was pulling his beard.
Hmm. Right, right, right. I always quote you when I'm teaching. You don't ever want to go toe to toe with a guy. If you're probably going to go to the ground, so you might as well go down on your own terms and use your strongest weapons. Yeah. So that's what we teach. We always teach strike. Know the striking areas. Strike, break, run. If that doesn't work, go down on your own terms. Blow out those knees or that groin, or up kick to the throat.
Very interesting. So how do you get people to do that? Because all my career, well, face it, we've been ridiculed for talking about exactly what you talked about. Oh my God, Brad, you never go to the ground. Only
Mhm.
dust bunnies and death are on the ground. And you start thinking, wait, I'm taking a 105-pound female and trying to fight a 195 or 200-pound male. And I didn't discover it. Our students did when we first were going through this, of like, I'm teaching this wrong.
Yeah.
I'm teaching women's self-defense incorrectly. And it turns out it's because I was doing like what everyone else was. I was teaching techniques that I learned to fight other men.
Hmm.
And women don't fight other women, except maybe in the UFC, but they have to fight men. So how do we turn that around upside its head? You talk about going Chihuahua crazy.
Yeah.
So fill me in. How do you meld those techniques in with your concept of going crazy, throwing a self-defense tantrum?
Well, first off, whenever I get that criticism, because there are people there that have been told don't go to the ground, I always I always say to them, the best UFC fighters are the mixed martial artists. They know how to fight on their feet and they know how to go to the ground. You need to know both, right? Because you're probably going down to the ground anyhow. And then you have the advantage of having the distance that your legs can create versus, fighting somebody at close distance, right? But whether you're on your feet or whether you're on your ground, you really need to give it 100%. And speed, I always say speed kills. You need to just keep fighting. Don't give up. If you can't think about your own defense, think about your family. I always call it family defense. Fight for your family, but never give up.
That's a great point. Who is counting on you? And I've heard this from shooting survivors and other people of like, I cannot die in this ditch tonight. Who's going to raise my kids?
Yeah.
Who's going to take care of my mom? Who's going to do those things? So tell me a little bit more of how you get people to think about who are they fighting for?
Oh, I think I might have mentioned this to you. I taught a class a couple weeks ago, and there was a woman in the class, and she was a little docile. She didn't really feel comfortable going Chihuahua. So the minute I said to her, "Okay, if he gets past you, he's going to get to your daughter," oh, she turned into total Chihuahua. So there we go. It's a mindset.
That's a true thing. And now I also, the flip side is I know of a case where attacker confronts a woman in her bedroom and her 1-year-old is sleeping in the next bedroom. And he says, if you don't, shut up or I'm going to hurt your child. And so she made this very Faustian bargain of like, okay, I will submit to his attack so he doesn't hurt my child. And yet the reality is, wait a second, what's to say that you can submit and he's still going to hurt your child? Right. So if not for you, who's there to protect your child or your loved one, right? Mm-hmm. So you never give up. You have to resist. We talked a little bit about this chart that we showed that's showing the resistance and the success rate. So we are big proponents of resisting. Now, tactically, you may find yourself in a position where you can't resist right that minute, or most likely the very first instant of the attack is when he has the least control over you. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So the longer you let it go on, the more control he has of you, versus at that first contact, that's when you have the best chance of escaping, right?
First 3 seconds, and going back to the Chihuahua, I always tell people it's not the size of the dog in the fight, it's the size of the fight in the dog. So when people have the mindset, oh, I'm a woman, I'm too small, I'm a 5-year-old child, are you kidding me? If a Chihuahua can bark off a big dog, trust me, a woman or a child can bark off their attacker. And a lot of it's going crazy and that mindset.
That's a great point. I like how you do that because that gives you a picture to think about, because I think everybody's seen those like crazy Chihuahuas. You're like, come on. Like you think, and yet they don't know that they're not 10 feet tall.
Right. Nobody's told them.
They got the swagger. Hey, yeah, exactly. You have no idea how big I am, even though I'm only 7 pounds.
Right.
Well, that's very interesting. It's the size of the fight in the dog. I like that. I like the picture that you get with the Chihuahua. How then is other ways that we can help people who, I'm not a fighter, I'm a nice person, I've never thought about that, I'll go back. How do we work with people who say, look, that's not me. I don't fight, I'm not strong, I'm not coordinated. What do we do from that standpoint?
I'd like to even add on to that. What do we say to the people that say it'll never happen to me?
Oh, good point. Good point.
Okay. So you got to get past that because there's no guarantee. And then you have to get in the mindset of, okay, can you train like that amazing young woman that we saw in the video who's, poster child for Wonder Woman? Apparently, she lifted weight that I think my son lifts, right? So are you going to train for strength Are you going to train for endurance? Or if you don't have that capability, then at least train for technique, but do something. Do something.
Well, and I tell you, we've had good success with, I say, don't throw your students in the jacuzzi all at once, is start slow, put your foot in, and then you can get your legs in, then you can sit down. You know what I'm saying? So um, pick an instructor that will work with you. Pick an
Right.
instructor or a school that will guide you along.
Mm-hmm.
And I learned this from the Gracies, Hori and Gracie, way back in the day. You know, Brad, the people that need self-defense training the most are the ones that don't do the self-defense training.
100%.
So be very cognizant of how the care and the feeding that you're bringing them in and getting them to start being able to produce. And another thing, I like your denial kind of thing, like it'll never happen to me. The other thing I get is, oh, I'll just run away, said by a person who there's no way they can run 20 feet versus 200 yards.
Right.
And I think we see these kind of funny fails videos, but you can see that there are people who are at a stage of their lack of fitness or whatever, and they fall easily. They can't move forward. They're very immobile. Give me some more on the people that'll say, it'll never happen to me. There's that kind of normalcy bias, or that kind of, the most interesting, bizarre one I've had is, oh, I don't need training because my ex-husband was a black belt.
Yeah. I heard that the other day.
Did you
Right.
really?
Right. Oh,
Because then I thought like,
my husband, we have a gun in our house or something like that. Yeah. My
oh yeah,
husband will
good
watch
point.
over me. Uh-huh.
Yeah,
Right.
well, or this one was even more bizarre because it's her ex-husband,
Yeah.
but because he was trained, she's not going to be attacked. So I think there's a lot of mental gymnastics that people do to try to stay in that normalcy of, this is so painful to think about. I
Hmm.
don't even want to train at all.
Right. Yeah. Well, I tell you how I start my classes. I always say to everybody, it's mostly children, how many of you had to do a fire drill at school? They raise their hand. How many of you had to do an earthquake drill? That's because we're in California. They raise their hand. How many of you had to do a lockdown drill at school? They raise their hand. How many of you had to
Oh,
learn
wait,
to swim?
California, how
Yeah.
many have to do a wildfire
Right,
drill? Yeah.
exactly. So everybody gets it. We train just in case. I've been in the martial arts for 29 years. I've never used my martial arts on a bad guy, right? But I at least I know what to do. I'm thinking about it. And you mentioned earlier about getting training. I think a lot of people think training means being in the martial arts. No, 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 no. I start my students at 5. A lot of parents bring their kids every year to me just for 2 hours. They go all the way through elementary school. Then I take them in middle school. I have a high school class. I have a college bound class. We have women's rape defense. But it's training. At least take a class every other year if you're not going to be in the martial arts. You don't have to be
One
a
thing that,
martial
yeah.
artist.
So let's talk a little bit about that. What's the difference between martial arts and self-defense?
Yeah, that's a topic for another podcast.
Yeah,
Right, right.
yeah.
Yeah, I don't know about you, but I always tell people, the martial arts, a lot of it is sport, and they learn weapons and katas, and it's a confidence builder that you learn self-discipline, but self-defense, to me, it's street defense. It's learning what to do in the worst case scenario and using, like you always taught us, large motor skills, not fine motor skills, to protect ourselves.
Well, and it's kind of interesting because situations that I've been involved with professionally or personally, I've had people say, well, where's all your martial arts? And I was like, that was it. And it's the concept of controlling people or avoiding,
Mhm.
or you don't not necessarily do a lot of punching in my profession, but you use those kind of things that you've learned. And my experience is people walk in your front door because they want to learn self-defense. But the
Right.
longer they go on, competition, it's fun, and you keep moving from that standpoint. But I'd like people to not lose sense of why they came there and what they're trying to accomplish.
Right, correct. And in fact, to be honest with you, I would say most of my students come because their parents make them. Do you know when I really see them wanting to learn? It's usually when they're a senior in high school and they're going off to college. They're
Oh,
there because
well, yeah,
they want
yeah.
to know what to do just in case.
So, as a woman, tell me a little bit about this because I know from men's standpoint is that this is a subject that men we talk about and we think we know a lot about, but for women, it's a background app that's running all the time. In the back of your mind, you're always guessing or thinking about, should I really go there at this time, at this place? Do I really need to go there? It's something that affects you way more than men know, correct?
Hmm. Yeah. A friend of mine told me the other day, her daughter, who's in her mid 20s, she got stuck downtown. One of her friends left her, and she had to she had to call an Uber, and it was Cinco de Mayo, and the Uber took over an hour. She was so frightened about being down there because it's not a great place to be. She stayed on the phone with her mom for over an hour until the Uber got there. That's how scared she was. So, I think about if she had just known, stay with people, go to people. Maybe she could have carried a personal protection product, but just knowing the prevention and the safety before even being in that situation.
Would you say then that for individuals that you know that have received a lot of training, does that help quiet that anxiety? Because now it's not necessarily, I don't know what to do if something happens. Now it's like, I know what to do if it happens. Now it's just when it happens. Do you have
Oh,
any kind of experience with that?
all the time. First of all, no, I don't think, I know women are feeling very uncomfortable right now, just in the culture that we're in now with violence on the rise, crime on the rise. And so that's always in the back of their mind. But then you and I know that, over 90% of the time we're going to know our attacker. So just giving them the information, you would not believe how many times my students go, oh, I do that. Oops. We do a role play where we'll have our student walk by my male instructor, and we'll tell her, be aware. So she's walking by him and he's going the opposite direction, and she never looks back. Just a simple head on a swivel, look back, make quick eye contact could save you from an attack, because predators are not going to attack someone that's aware. Just that one little tidbit could save her or him from an
Oh,
attack.
well, Tracie, come on. Now you're telling, now I'm going to be accused of being all these things to so many different people because I don't trust them. They walk by me and I give them the eye, right? I'm a
Mhm.
horrible person for not trusting my fellow citizen, right?
It's my safety first, then your feelings.
Yep, exactly. So his feelings are not worth your safety, right?
Yeah, and I
Um,
always tell them you don't have to stare them down. I mean, I'll look at them and then I'll kind of look up like I'm looking at an airplane. Not to mention I don't want to get in a conversation with somebody. But yeah,
no,
there's
I've
so many.
actually, when you bring that up, I've actually been confronted that way as you're walking past someone. Actually, I was coming up to a street corner, stopping on the curb, and the person was walking across the street in the crosswalk. And as they went by me, they button hooked and came behind me and started a
Oh,
fight.
right,
And so
right. Yeah.
there's two interesting learning points from my development. One was, yeah, you have to watch people who are walking past you. At least look down and see if they're still behind you, or just like you said, kind of casually turn around. And then the other thing, this is only interesting to martial artists, is when I turned around to face him, I had my wrong foot forward. And I thought to
Ah,
myself, ooh, I hate fighting in an unorthodox stance. And after that was over, my training was like, I cannot, I've got to get really comfortable in both orthodox and unorthodox stances, because I cannot be the one to say, ooh, yeah, I don't like fighting this side forward.
right.
I cannot have that happen. So that was a learning path that I learned from a real situation there. And the guy, we ended up not, it was a confrontation, but it was a mental health related issue
Oh, right.
versus an actual it was a confrontation, didn't get physical, but it was close.
Hmm. Yeah. This is probably a topic for another podcast, but one of the things that we role play in our classes, and we do a lot of role playing because if you don't role play it, you don't act it out, you're not going to remember it. If it happens, it surprises me how many people, I'll say, okay, he's going to ask you the time. So my instructor walks up, hey, do you have the time? And she'll always like just look down at her watch. Yeah, I've got 2:30. Versus looking, putting your hand up, creating the boundary. We always say try to keep a stranger at least 6 arm lengths away. And then if you want to give them the time, give them the time. But at least you've set a boundary. You're going to know if he's a creeper or she, because they're going to continue to move towards you. Simple boundary knowledge could save a person attack. The ABCs of self-defense: awareness, boundaries. Do you have the confidence to set the boundary? Simple as
Yeah, I
that.
like that a lot. I like that a lot because that is part of the interview process that predators use to get close to people. It used to be, hey, do you have a light? People don't smoke that much anymore. I kind of laugh when you said we look down at our watch. Yeah,
Yeah.
well, you're showing your age. When you say, oh, I wear a watch.
Right. I do.
Well, yeah,
Fitbit.
most people look at their phones, but it's a way to engage you, to get close to you because they can't attack you from, you're saying, 6 arm lengths away. And this is a whole different podcast. We can talk about social distance is not good, safe self-defense distance. We
Hmm.
can go through all of that. But I find it very interesting that we're talking overarching today, that we're talking about getting training and having it be consistently reintroduced at some kind of period, because if you can't show it, you don't know it. In other words, we can't expect our bodies to produce a reaction if we've never showed our body how to do that, correct?
100% right. And I wanted to ask you a question. Are there any statistics out there that show uh, a person that takes a self-defense class being attacked? Because I I've had students tell me, "Oh, I was attacked. My mom made me take a self-defense class in high school," but they were able to fight out of it. Versus someone who never takes a self-defense class. It'd be interesting to see what the statistics show. Once you take a self-defense class, the odds of you being attacked, only because of the way you carry yourself or the
Oh,
things you
well,
know.
that's a great point. I didn't think you were going down that road, but that's the point. Is it's interesting when I teach kids, and I have a parent to say, I don't want my child to be a fighter. Like, I guess what? It's this counterintuitive thing. The better fighters they become, the less chance that they actually have to use their fighting ability. And I'll also take another quick little thing. One of men's biggest regrets when they get older is they did not know how to defend themselves.
Yeah,
They
oh,
never
sure.
learned. And so it's crushing for boys to lose fights. And I'm not saying you have to go out and get fights. I don't know about the statistics, but I will tell you my experience. And my experience is a couple of things. And one thing as an instructor, and you've run into this as well, is when someone comes up to you and says, I don't know if you remember me, but I think you saved my life.
Oh, yeah.
And that's when they tell you, this is what happened to me. And I remember what I learned. And part of what people who've never taken classes know is use this kind of verbal shorthand where we are coaching you through. And I had another woman who said she was approaching a parking lot, and she managed to get out of the interview process. But she said, I heard your voice in my head telling me what to do, because
Right.
you're constantly being coached. And now I have this verbal thought process that's giving me my process for physical things. I also had students, several students, one in particular, I think this is the comment that he made, was he came in and said, oh my God, it happened to me. I was attacked. I said, what happened? He goes, it was just like class. And so you
Wow.
realize that training and drilling in realistic encounters, ones that actually happen, prepare your students and prepare us for the attacks. Now, as you've said before, I don't have to wonder, oh my God, what's happening? No, I know what that looks like. I've been attacked that way 1,000 times in class. I know what that looks like,
Right.
and I know what to do from it. Now, you and I, as martial artists, we can argue about what's the best thing to do, but the point I make with people is have something that you can do. And the
Something.
point is, I have the confidence that it's worked for me, and doing something is better than doing nothing.
Exactly.
So I like that standpoint.
Yeah. And if you want to end the podcast with a self-defense success story, I had a mom come to me a couple years ago. She had her daughter take my elementary school age class as a Girl Scout, 4th grade. And then she had her take the class in middle school. It's kind of my basic class. They don't fight the guy yet. Well, then her mom said, "You're not leaving for college until you take Tracie's, full contact fight the guy class." And she's like, "Mom, I've already taken 2 classes. I don't need it." So her mom makes her take the class. It's June. She's just getting ready to graduate. She's going off to college. She's at a gas station at 7:30 in the morning. This guy comes up behind her, tries to push her into her car. She headbutts him, turns around, kicks him in the groin, jumps in her car and drives home, and said to her mom, well, of course the police came out, told her mom and the police, "I'm really glad you made me take that class again." So yeah.
That is the mantra throughout this whole thread that I want to just say is let's get training, let's get realistic training, let's approach it as any other kind of life-saving thing like you talked about, CPR, fire drills, and all of that, and let's take that fear of the unknown away from us, because now we know what to do if we are attacked.
100%. And you don't have to be a martial artist. Just take a self-defense class.
Great. Thanks, Tracie. Totally appreciate it.
Yeah.
All right.
Thanks a lot, Brad.
We'll talk on the next one, okay?
Gotcha.